This is All of It on WNYC. I'm Allison Stewart. We continue on with something you can do in Brooklyn this summer, a film series showcasing Arab filmmakers. It's called the Anna Contemporary Arab Cinema Series. Films from Morocco, Lebanon, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iraq are now screening at BAM in Brooklyn, with more to come in the festival's final week at the Jacob Burns Film Center in Westchester. Series programmer and film curator Lina Mata is joining us here to share more about the series. Welcome back to All of It.
Hi, thank you for inviting me.
So the name of your film series includes the Arabic word Ana.
Yes.
What does that translate to?
It means I, and it's about the directors. I wanted our Arab directors to tell our stories in our own words. I felt for years our stories were being told by either Americans or Europeans, and they were it was not the same as us being able to tell our own stories. So the whole thing was about us telling our own stories, and for us to bring the films to a New York audience, because a lot of these films were being produced and they were never coming out of the region. And you didn't want to preach to the converted. You wanted to preach to an audience who did not know, who didn't know. So that was one of the reasons that I wanted to bring it to New York.
You've discussed the importance of filmmakers who are willing to take risks in the themes that they explore. What's an example of a filmmaker or a film, somebody who's involved in challenging conversations?
That's interesting. You know, a lot of the topics that are being covered are topics that I am generally surprised are being covered in films. You know, I work in television, and we have a lot of things that we can and cannot talk about. So to see that these filmmakers are bringing these topics up in films is very exciting. So you have pleasure weddings, you have honor killings, you have LGBTQ topics, AIDS. I'm trying to think of this year. Definitely conversations about poverty, about aging and sensuality in aging. So just very interesting topics that are being brought to the table.
What were you looking for in your films to determine whether it was the right fit for your series?
You know, there are a lot of films you see and you know immediately that this is it. I'm showing in New York, so I cannot choose films that are very regional and only speak to the audiences from that country. I want films that have international messages that can travel beyond borders. But I also like to have a mix. So I don't want to have a series that is just films from Lebanon or just films from Syria. I want there to be a variety in topics and a variety of countries that are being represented. And I'm always looking for new voices. I think in the last few years, there are filmmakers that are coming out from countries that didn't even have movie theaters up until a few years ago. So, for instance, Saudi Arabia, for 35 years, blackout, no movie theaters. And then in the last 8 years, they opened their first movie theater, and with it came a government encouragement for entertainment and just funding and encouraging their storytellers to tell their stories. So in 8 years, they went from zero to an industry and films that are being shown in Cannes. Same for Somalia, Yemen, Sudan. Again, all countries with maybe no, because of the political turmoil and the problems and the economic situation in these countries, a lot of them had no movie theaters for years. And yet these filmmakers are somehow managing to get together, mentor each other, and create a movement that has films that are making it to international film festivals.
My guest is programmer and film curator for the Anna Contemporary Arab Cinema Series, Lina Mata. Go get your ticket for a screening today. Films are being shown at BAM in Brooklyn until July 23rd, with more to come at the Jacob Burns Film Center in Westchester from July 22nd to the 28th. In years prior, it was only 1 week, and now...
You know, when we first started out, it was at the Jacob Burns,
Yeah.
and then for a couple of years, it was at both the BAM and the Burns, and then I stopped the Jacob Burns for a while, and now we're starting up again. So we're very, very excited to be back home, practically.
This Wednesday, you'll screen The Voice of Hind Rajab at BAM. The film went on to become nominated for an Academy Award in the Best International Film Festival this past year. We interviewed the filmmaker on this show. Why have these films, these Arab films, broken through internationally recently?
I think it's a mix of things. I think there's an interest in the Middle East that might I think there's always been an interest in the Middle East, but the interest in the Middle East has been more about politics and war. And now we have storytellers that are strong enough and just excellent in their. There's been a lot of money that's being poured into storytelling. There's been a lot of money that's been poured into mentorship, into training, into writing, and a lot of European mentors, American mentors, Turkish mentors that are coming into the mix and helping the filmmakers tell their stories better, with access to funding that has become wider than it used to be before. So I think that it's a mix of everything. It's all coming together. Also, we now have, when I started, there used to be a film festival. So there were no film festivals in the region that were big and international and invited guests. So the Dubai Film Festival, the Abu Dhabi Film Festival, the Qatar Film Festival, all came. And with them came workshops and mentorship programs and funding initiatives. And then after that, now the Red Sea Film Festival is initiating a lot of co-productions, and so it's all coming together.
It sounds like you have
help the industry.
Yeah, you have a new generation of filmmakers who have support that they didn't have before,
and they're supporting each other. Which is wonderful. I mean, I think
that's
a lot. Yeah, which is very rare.
Yeah,
in a field that's very competitive, you have filmmakers that are working together and supporting each other and trying to handhold each other through the process.
What's a film that you hope everyone should see? If they could see it, click the, snap their fingers and they could watch it right now, what film would you want people to see?
I think Hind Rashab that you just mentioned is a very important film to see, because it's a story of this little girl that was stuck in a car with everybody around her who had died. And she was trying to call for help, and there was no help coming, even though the ambulance was 10 minutes away. So I think this is an incredibly important story. But even smaller stories, I think Sit, which was our opening night film at BAM and our closing night film at the Jacob Burns, is about Kulthum. He's an iconic singer, Egyptian singer who was hugely known outside of Egypt. The streets would empty out when Kulthum was on the radio and singing. So this is an important one. Kaya Malaga is very interesting because it talks about aging and being able to enjoy a life after 70. Do You Love Me is an amazing work of this is a woman who spent 7 years looking into 20,000 hours of archival footage and putting together a film that tells the story of Lebanon through archival footage. Bushra is an animated coming out story. So it's very difficult to pinpoint a film that you would say this is the one that you have to watch, because all of them are so original in their own way. I'm
going to ask you to make a case for A Sad and Beautiful World. We have Cyril Aris.
I love A Sad and Beautiful World. I love Cyril's work. I've been a fan. I've shown his documentary, The Swing, which was a personal documentary about his grandparents. And then that was followed by Dancing on the Edge of a Volcano, which told the story of the making of the film Costa Brava in the midst of COVID, the Lebanese financial crisis, the port explosion. I mean, everything that could possibly go wrong. And it's usually very difficult to make a documentary, but everything over and above went wrong while they were making this film, and they still managed to get a film out that premiered at Venice. So this one is his third film. It's his first feature, and it, as a Lebanese, it asks the eternal questions of do I go or do I stay? And all of us have, packed our bags and went back to Lebanon, spent a few years, and then things would happen and we'd leave, and then Lebanon would lure us back. So the fact that he tackles it so beautifully in his film is, I love Cyril's work.
Well, we'll ask him about it next. My guest has been programmer and film curator for the ANA Contemporary Arab Cinema series, Lina Mata. You can get your ticket now. Films are showing at BAM in Brooklyn until July 23rd, with more to come at the Jacob Burns Film Center in Westchester from July 22nd through the 28th. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much.
And coming up, we'll speak with the director of one of the films being screened as part of the ANA Contemporary Arab Cinema series. This is All of It. This is all of it on WNYC. I'm Allison Stewart. In the film A Sad and Beautiful World, a love story spanning 3 decades is set against the changing political and economic backdrop of Lebanon. The story follows a couple. Nino is an optimist. Yasmina is a pragmatist. Together they must decide if they can build a future and chart a path to happiness in Lebanon for their family, despite the difficulties and circumstances ravaging their country. A Sad and Beautiful World is from Lebanese writer-director Cyril Aris. He's one of the filmmakers featured at this year's ANA Contemporary Arab Cinema Series, which is taking place now at BAM. A Sad and Beautiful World will be screening this Thursday. You can get your tickets by going to BAM's website. We're thrilled now to be joined by Cyril Aris. Cyril, it is nice to speak with you.
Very nice to speak to you too. Thanks for having me.
You've directed several documentaries and short films. This is your first feature film. What was the same directing fiction versus was nonfiction, and what was different between directing the two?
I think that in documentaries, you're really pointing the camera and trying to, capture the essence of a place or a specific emotion of being in a particular time in a specific place, and you're looking at reality the way it is. I think when it comes to fiction, there's much, there's a greater space for dream, for imagination, for reality the way you want it to be, not necessarily the way it is. And I guess that's the beauty of fiction as opposed to documentaries.
Your film begins with the birth of Yasmina and Nina. They're under fire from blasts. Why was it important to show these two births at the very beginning of your film?
Well, I think that the first scene of a film should translate the emotion of the film, and I think that having the birth of these two protagonists, Nino and Yasmina, while they're being surrounded by explosions and war and so much darkness, like the coexistence of such a happy moment for the couple and the protagonist that's juxtaposed to so much darkness and violence is very much the tone of the film and the tone of Lebanon in a way, and it's also embedded in the title itself, A Sad and Beautiful World. So it was quite important to try to translate that emotion from the get-go, and also to show that these two protagonists are really meant to be together. They're fated to be together. They're born 1 minute apart in the same circumstances, and whatever happens, they keep finding each other again and again over the course of 3 decades.
The film questions and contradicts the growing up in Lebanon. What other ideas did you want to explore in this film?
There's so many, I think it very much started just like Lena said, with this question about staying versus leaving. As you know, there's a big Lebanese diaspora in the US, for example, but everywhere in the world there's a big Lebanese diaspora, and there's always this identity question that we have, or this existential question about staying versus leaving. But also, as I was writing, as I was developing these two characters that are so antagonistic in their perspectives, in their visions of the world, in the future of their country, I realized that the central question that I was trying to answer is whether it was still worth bringing children into our world today. And that question is so much more universal, and it transcends the borders of Lebanon and the specificity of the context of Lebanon and the Middle East. But it's a question that all millennials ask themselves across the world, and especially in the Western world as well. Given that the climate change anxiety, the economic burden of bringing children, so I realized that was more the question, or the central question that I was trying to answer. And and there's sub themes about immigration, staying versus leaving, how to survive in the world today, how to keep hope and dreams for the future.
Tell me about Nino in A Sad and Beautiful World. How would you describe him?
Nino, I think
He's sweet,
he
sort of.
he's very sweet. He's all over the place. He's chaotic. He's very energetic. He's highly optimistic, but all of this is just it's kind of a facade to hide a deeper sadness, or a refusal to acknowledge the harshness and the darkness of the world. So he compensates with just being extremely joyful, with not necessarily looking at reality the way it is. I think he embodies Beirut and Lebanon itself. Yasmina, on the contrary, Yasmina is so much more cynical because she's more pragmatic. She sees reality the way it is, and she always expects the negative outcome or the more cynical outcome. So in a way, she's much more realistic, but that is also because she's just a disappointed idealist. You know,
Hmm.
she still has that innocent child within her, and all it needs is a Nino to get this out of her.
We're talking about the film A Sad and Beautiful World. It'll be screening at BAM this Thursday, July 23rd. My guest is writer-director Cyril Aris. This story is set up against sort of a darker political backdrop, but there's humor in this story.
Of
There's a lot
course,
of humor.
of course, it's a comedy, it's a
It's
rom-com.
a
Like,
rom-com, right?
it very much so, very much so. I was using very much the rules of romantic comedies. I was looking a lot at rom-coms from the golden era of Hollywood, or even the more independent ones from American cinema from the 90s, because I think this is kind of a dying genre, but it's the genre that makes us fall in love with films and with the cinema. At least it was the case for me. So I was using the rules of the rom-com, but setting it over something that's more serious and more and more I mean darker by the mere fact that this is set in the Middle East, but it very much is um, a, a comedy, and I really hope that you know people will get the comedy and will laugh along um, with the characters.
Who were some of the rom-coms? What were some of the rom-coms that you watched before writing or while you were writing this film?
Oh, I mean, there's the more comedic ones like when Harry met Sally, and there's the more realistic ones like Blue Valentine.
Hmm.
There's also I would say that the golden era of Hollywood from the 40s and the 50s also, like I'm talking Roman Holiday. I'm talking like these amazing rom-coms. So yeah, I was inspired a lot by American cinema for this film.
Nino and Yasmina were children at the start of the story, but we see flashbacks to their childhood throughout the film. What were
Mhm.
sort of specific personality traits that you really wanted people to identify between the child actors and then the adult characters?
Hmm. I think I I think it's hard to say because I think we all find ourselves a bit in Nino and or Yasmina.
Mm.
I think that in Lebanon specifically, when the country is doing well, when we're going through a period of peace or prosperity, we tend to be more optimistic. We tend to be more joyful. But then when we find ourselves more in periods of turmoil, political turmoil, or war or regional conflict, like now, we tend to be more pessimistic, and we see
Mm.
how this impacts the children. We see how Yasmina, for example, literally Yasmina was dealing with two wars in her childhood: the war inside her home, which is the
Hmm.
divorce of her parents, but also the war happening on the outside, and that really shaped her pessimistic view of her country and the future. Nino, on the contrary, we see that well, obviously he deals with the war outside, but his grandfather, who takes custody of him, subvert these dark circumstances into something that is much more optimistic, something that is much more dreamlike, and that also shapes his personality and making him more optimistic and almost delusional to a point. And that's why we keep going back and forth between their childhood and their adulthood to see how the events from their childhood find ramifications or have direct consequences in shaping them in their adulthood.
It's interesting because you said you have these dreamlike scenarios. There's a shot where they're running, Nino and Yasmina down the street, and the
Hmm.
camera's sort of in fast motion. They look like they're like streaks of color. They appear
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
way. What effects were you trying to capture through this artistic direction.
Yeah. We see, so this shot gets repeated twice. We see it once in their childhood, and it's when they're escaping from school, and they find so much freedom and so much joy in being in each other's presence and escaping from the real world, or like the world of school and the adults. But then we see it again in their adulthood as they're falling in love with as they rediscover each other, and they're falling in love with each other. And I remember talking about this specific visual shot with my cinematographer, and the main direction was trying to translate the feeling of euphoria. Like how do you personify, or how do you visualize feelings of euphoria, of falling in love, having butterflies in your stomach, and how to translate that into sights and sounds. And we came up with these effects of slow shutter speed, this very energetic camera with a lot of exuberance, and it climaxes with the music and the sound, and not to spoil too much, but with a dreamlike train travel to a magical island.
We won't give too much away about the magical island.
Yes.
We're talking about with Cyril Aris. He is the writer and director of the film A Sad and Beautiful World. You've mentioned in a previous interview that the film points towards a broader generational cynicism towards life and the
Mhm.
economy and the environment of your peers. Why was that important for you to address?
Because I think it's precisely what the questioning that I was going through in my personal life, and the more I was doing research, the more I realized that it was a generational question, and all across the world, in the Western world, but also in the global South, there are many countries with declining birth rates. In some countries, there's more mortality than births. So I started, digging deeper and deeper, and I realized that it's really a universal generational question, and I think it's the question that defines our generation right now, and it's a manifestation of this overall, or this ambient cynicism. And it's quite interesting to see that, despite living in, I would say, a relatively prosperous area when we compare it to the generation of our parents or our grandparents, and here I'm talking a bit more about the Lebanese context, like
Hmm.
we have a more prosperous, in a way, era. It's quite interesting to see that we've grown so cynical, and I really wanted to explore that and to see what would be the counterweight of that. And as naive as it sounds, it's love, and it's family, and it's friendship, and it's all the relationships that carry us forward.
Cyril, when you were writing the film, how did current events in Lebanon inspire or change the film?
It changed everything because I started writing in 2019, and in 2019 it was before the major economic crisis,
Uh,
before the port explosion, before all the wars, before everything. But then in 2020, 2021, 2022, as we're going from one crisis to the other, I was trying to adapt the screenplay to reflect that, up to a point where in like around 2022 my producer told me, like, the script became so dark, like it's just pure drama, and like nothing is going right, everything is just going wrong. And
yeah.
my producer told me, like, you have to remember that we like the story, and we decided to produce this film because it has such a magical, lyrical, poetic tone. It's a love story about this couple that is standing, it's us against the world, and they overcome all these obstacles, and there's a strong sense of a rather joyful and optimistic film. So you're very much being influenced by everything happening now. So you got to take a break
Yeah.
and just find again this love, because it's a love story. It's first and foremost um, a love story. But then, going back, deeply into the love story, and shutting our eyes to the existing reality would be completely delusional. So in the end, it was a matter of finding the balance of how much we're telling the story of this couple and their love story versus how much we're telling the story of a country. And I think that by the end of it, we were able to find a bit this balance where we focus a lot on the love story, but the couple becomes a reflection of the social and political context in which they grow up and they evolve.
How has the film been received in Lebanon?
In Lebanon, it's been very well received, I think, because the general expectation of Arab cinema and Lebanese cinema is highly dramatic. It's often things that films that reflect the social reality that or the political reality that we're going through, which is which, which tends to be very violent and very dark, and we tend to talk about wars. And this is a film that tries to say yes, and it's like,
Yeah.
yes, there is all of that, but there's more than that. There's also people who are still falling in love and having beautiful moments and making families and trying to build something despite all of these circumstances. And for the people who stayed in Lebanon, all of them stayed despite everything.
Yeah.
So all of them identified quite strongly with the film. And the most common feedback I was receiving is that this is a film that really portrays us as we are, in the way we laugh, in the way we cry, in the way we go through wars and crisis,
And we need
but in
to,
the way we keep hoping and dreaming.
yeah, we
Yeah.
need to end there. We've been speaking to writer and director Cyril Aris. His latest film, A Sad,
Thank you so
Beautiful
much.
World, is at BAM this Thursday, July 23rd. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks. It was a pleasure.
This is all of it on WNYC. There'll be more right after the news.